Hello, everybody. It is my delight to have Matthieu Pageau joining us today. How are you doing, Matthieu?
I'm doing good. It's good to meet you, and thanks for making those videos about my book that you did a while ago. So thanks for that.
N- Uh, it's the least that I could do, man. That was such an inspirational book to me and so many other people. Really helped so many people see the scriptures and see reality so much more clearly, and it's inspired so much. And I know that there was a few videos of you with Jordan Peterson around the time that the book came out in 2018. Conversations with your brother Jonathan. Um, and then the book was published, and then it seems like Matthieu Pageau had a vanishing, and we didn't see or hear from him for several years. And now you're re-emerging here in 2022. Conversations with Jordan Peterson again, and several others. So I just got to say, on behalf of me and the listeners and the people that care about you and your work, it's good to see you. It's really good to see you again.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm back because now I have new things to say. Basically, that's the reason why I'm back. So basically, I said what I wanted to say in my book, and then I just decided I was gonna understand what I didn't. That's how it works for me. Yeah, it's like I dropped what I thought was worth sharing. And then I went back to trying to understand things that I didn't understand. So that's what I've been doing. And I mean, it's hard to do that if you're engaged in social media and things like that. It's hard to focus. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of brain space, to be dealing with different people. It's a choice you got to make. You can do it. It's a good thing. I mean, but you could decide not to do that, which is pretty much what I did. And even recently, I decided maybe I wanted to make maybe a couple of videos. Just the idea of making a video has kind of stolen my focus. So it's what's
Right.
going to happen is probably I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go back to concentrating on writing.
A lot of followers and listeners are not used to that. Usually, someone who's a successful author will usually have an Instagram account and a Twitter account and a Facebook and a YouTube and a podcast. And
For some people, it's natural to engage with others. For some people, it's natural. For some people, it gives them energy too. But for me, it's the opposite. It drains a lot of energy for me to interact with people I don't really know. I mean, I can easily interact with my close friends and things like that. That's not the same, but interacting with people, it just drains my energy, and it just takes my energy away from what I want to work on.
people do care a lot about you. So, just I guess one of the common questions that I'll ask you is, how are you and how has it been, in the last couple of years?
Um, it's been okay. I mean, I'm pretty resilient. I've had some interesting experiences that has led me to understand what I do understand now, the new information or the new insights that I have. But I mean, I've had some struggles, but it's helped me to understand a lot of things. So I'm grateful for it now. Even when it was happening, I'm pretty I'm pretty tough, to be honest. Like internally, it's not really much can break me. You know what I mean? It's so sometimes negative things turn into positives. It's pretty much what happened. So so right now, I mean, I literally live in a yurt right now.
How's the yurt life? What's that like?
It's great, actually. I love it. It, I wanted to at one point build some greenhouses with someone I know. So I started that, but then it turns out it didn't work out with that person. Basically, I guess he was trying to steal from me. Honestly, that's what
Oh,
happened.
sorry to hear that.
So then I realized, and then it didn't end well. So and then after that, a series of things happened, and I ended up living in a yurt. But I mean, that's what I wanted in the first place. I wanted to live on that land and then work in greenhouses. Um, and then because it didn't turn out well with that person, I had to move. So
Okay.
I bought a small piece of land, like a forested place, and I rebuilt my whole yurt and everything. And now, it's great. Now I'm really happy to have that.
Oh, what's the difference between like living in a rectangular space and then living in a circular one?
Yes, there actually is a big difference. You got to live it to see it. I don't know how to explain it, but definitely since I've been living in like a round space, it's definitely has an influence on your thinking and on your mood and your mind and your ideas. And also it's not just the roundness of it. It's definitely something, though. I don't know how to describe it, but there's no doubt when I enter that space, it's not the same as in a house. Okay. But there's also the way it's constructed. There's like a window above, right? That's, I don't know if you're familiar with.
Oh, at the center.
Yurts.
Yeah, the apex, right?
Yeah, there's like a dome, and it's like a transparent dome at the top. That's where all the light comes in. So it's you have natural light, basically. It's just always natural light, and that's not the same too. It's really not the same as light bulbs. It's not the same mood. It's not the same. I don't know how to describe it. It's just an experience, and there's something about just, it causes you to see nature a lot more. Like now I know, like I can tell what temperature it is now, just by feel. And I always know what time it is too now. I always know what time it is. I don't need to look at watch. I always know, because I'm used to it now. I know where the sun is, like, because the way it's constructed, the sun goes into the top, and then it almost creates a clock. It almost creates a clock in the yurt. If you see where the sun lands, and then it moves. So it's weird, but now I guess more in touch with nature. I guess it just happened. And also, like, now I notice a lot of things that I didn't notice before, because I'm basically living surrounded by animals, and lots of weird things happening in the forest during the night. Sometimes there's some weird stuff happening. It happens often, actually. Like I wake up, and then I feel some like energy. I'm excited for some reason. I don't know why. And then all of a sudden, the animals they start screaming all around, like wolves and coyotes and owls. Whoa. All of a sudden, like all of them at once. And the weird thing is, I wake up before it happens. That's not what wakes me up. Like I wake up, and I feel like, excited or something. I feel energy. And then I know, it's like, I know it's going to happen. I don't know how to describe it. It just is. I know it's going to, I know there's energy in the air. Okay. And then all the animals all of a sudden go nuts. The wolves, and like I just said, and then now I'm used to it. I mean, because it happens at least maybe twice a week or so. Right in the middle of the night, there's like an orchestra of animals all of a sudden. It happens often. It's not that weird. It just happens when you live in the woods. At one point, you start noticing certain things.
Yeah. So it seems like you're in a space. I mean, like your walls are canvas cloth, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like more of a modern yurt, where it's made of modern materials. So it's it's canvas, but it's not textile. It's like I don't know what it is exactly, but it's a kind of a rubbery kind of more like a tent. It's not cloth, but I mean it has the same
well,
thickness,
I mean,
it is
intrigued. You have me thinking about like what it's like to actually be inside of there. Like, so you have light emitting from the center of like this circular place. Like, do you feel like you're, like, to use your terminology, more engaged, more engrossed in the realm of time, or of that of space?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm really, really aware now of the temperature, the humidity. When the sun rises, when it goes down. I know the cycles of the moon now. I always know what cycle, what the moon is in which cycle, like which phase of the cycle. I mean, because I see it now. And it's like now I notice, how cold it is at night. I never used to know that. Like usually when you're in a house, you don't know that it's cold outside during the night. You're just sleeping. You got a good heating.
You have a wood burning stove?
Oh yeah, I have to wake up in the middle of the night to during the winter. I have to, like, let's say maybe wake up at least once a night to make a fire. Uh Even now, like it's abnormally cold right now for this month. And yeah, I got to get up at like 3 and make a fire. You got to do it, or else it reaches like below zero temperatures.
Wow.
So, but you get used to it. It's you can get used to anything. It's actually, there's something good about it when you get up in the middle of the night. This is actually when I have a lot of my more profound insights. It's when I get up in the middle of the night, like at 3 a.m. is a good time to think. I don't know why, but it's just the fact that I've noticed. It's just like my experience. And then you have a clearer understanding of simple things. And sometimes I think about, stories from the Bible, and certain things I'm trying to understand. And then when I wake up in the middle of the night to like build a fire or something like that, this is usually when I have some insights. And then I have to write it down, because you always think you're going to remember, but usually you don't actually. Sometimes you have some glimpses of really good ideas, like an understanding that you don't have before. And then you think, oh, I don't have to write this down. I'm going to remember. This is like really profound stuff.
Yeah.
But then like 2 days later, you don't remember it. But now I know. Now I always write it down. I always write everything down.
Always. Yeah. So it's interesting that you get such clear thoughts during the realm of sleep and the darkness, or the time of dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't know. Yeah, those type of things that you swear you'll never forget. It's interesting how you can wake up and just have like a figment, like a phantom of like, I think I had a really good idea, but I don't remember what that was.
Yeah. Yeah. But if you write it down, I mean, I think there's a reason why. I mean, monks used to do that, right? They used to get up in the middle of the night and like sing songs and things like that. They used to have like services in the middle of the night. I mean, there's a reason. They knew what they were doing, and there was a reason why they did that. It's definitely something. When you wake up in the middle of the night, your brain is not functioning the same way. It's more clear. I don't know why, but it's just by experience. I've noticed that.
Matthieu, what would you say is like a day in the life of Matthieu Pageau in the Yurt life?
Well, there's a lot of chores, to be honest. Yes, there's a lot of chopping of wood. There's a lot of getting water. Oh, it's true. It's like when you notice at one point that life is about eating, sleeping, getting water. We use a lot of water. Like humans use a lot of water. I'm amazed sometimes at how much water I use, because when you have to go get it, when you have to go fill up some containers and bring it, you notice how much water you use, and it's a heck of a lot, to be honest. I never would have imagined how much water we use. And I'm not saying that in it like an ecological sense of wasting water or anything like that. It's just I never would have thought I used so much water. It's like we use water for everything, like you gotta clean dishes, you gotta cook. It's so much water that you use. Like you don't notice it when you have a tap, it's not a big deal. You just put water in. But when you gotta go get it and you gotta carry it, you're like, man, I use so much water. It's like you get big jugs and I got enough for a few days, but no, you got enough for one day. You know what I mean? And also same thing, chopping a lot of wood. I'm always chopping wood now. It's like I'm getting good at it, actually. But I mean, these are all activities that you can do and think. It's not like it doesn't use my mind to do these things. This is the good part of it. You can. I think that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be engaged in like manual work, and at the same time always be reflecting. That's my opinion. I think we've lost that because we most of us have jobs where we have to use our mind, but we're not using our mind for really deep thinking. We're using our mind to do these tasks.
Right.
And then, so we might think it's better to have an intellectual job. We might think that, but in a way it's not, because your mind is being used for the task. While on the other hand, if you're doing manual stuff, your mind can still operate. You can still think. The manual work becomes good for someone who's interested in intellectual pursuits.
Yes, I totally agree. So there's times where like I'm in the office, right? And I'm supposed to be doing all this computer work, tons and tons of computer work, right? But then I'll just stop and I'll go wash dishes, or I'll go like with the little pinchers and pick up garbage around the parking lot or something. And a lot of my coworkers, they'll get frustrated and say like, "Oh, Derek, why aren't you working? You're not
Mhm.
typing stuff on your keyboard." And it's like, you don't understand, like I am.
Yeah.
But I need to be doing these things in order to have clear thoughts, or have thoughts kind of settle upon me.
Are you a programmer? Or-
No, so I do community work. So I work with a nonprofit, but just all of the communication is on the computer. Most of the programs and the tools that I use are computer based.
yeah, it's all computer, computer related.
And then so
Yeah.
you eventually get like these square eyes, and your brain kind of turns into this fog when you're like immediately doing direct tasks on the computer. And so I'll try to break that up, and I'll go, you know, proverbially I'll chop wood, or I'll go work in the garden, or, I'll try to do these things that are simple, laborious
Yeah,
tasks that I love.
gardening is good. Gardening
Uh-huh.
is good. If you want to,
And
like, the best work that you can do for that kind of stuff is gardening. It's the best.
uh,
It's like a relaxing,
that was one of the questions. Well, one of the feedback I wanted to give you from reading your book, Language of Creation, was, um, so it feels like it's a very spiritually intellectual, challenging read, and it can be a very intellectual experience. But then I found that unless I try to find ways of engaging with it in the material world, um, that I started to get kind of frayed in my thinking. And so, like when I first read it a few years ago, I started volunteering in a community garden, and I was trying to find ways of applying things. So, like, I made the garden bed into the shape of, the axis, so like a vertical and pathway and a horizontal pathway, kind of like a shape of a cross, and try to do like these circular arrangements and spirals. And it was like, but all the while engaging with, soil and sowing seeds and seeing them grow, and then seeing them decay and seeing the cycle take place within an ordered space. And I found that it was actually in that space that most of my insights through reading your work sunk in, or veiled themselves. So I don't know if there's other advice that you could give readers, or experiences that you have, for like how to engage the material that you present in your book.
Yeah, well, it's about it's not easy, but it took me a long time to start thinking like that, honestly. Yeah. It took me years. It's like at one point I saw that what was in the Bible didn't fit with our current worldview, it didn't fit. So I just decided that I had to, or that I wanted to, rediscover, like, how did they think, what was their background of their mind from which these stories were developed. And so I mean, it's a lot of it is about thinking really basically. Like I was I was thinking a lot about what do humans do, we eat, we breathe. These are simple things, but we take them for granted a whole lot. I mean, I remember when I started to think, I think at the right level of it, I was just thinking about eating, and I was like, man, eating is insane. We take some matter and we make our bodies, like we create our own bodies with this matter. I mean, how crazy is that? I mean, when you really think about it, and when you realize that that's what life is all about, it's about integrating the world into yourself, and it then expressing some new insights from your existence. It we don't it's like you got to go back to the basics. You got to go back to one of the things I was doing too, which was hard, is to get back to your experience. I started thinking in terms of just, what do I observe? And then what I observed was, the sun coming out of the ground, going up, falling down, going into the earth. And for sure, the ancient peoples of the world used to be amazed at that stuff and used to try to understand what it was. I mean, what is this fire that comes out of the ground and goes up into heaven? Then it goes to like a maximum, and then it goes back down and it falls back down into the earth. And then what does it do when it's in the earth? What does the sun do? Is it going on a journey or something? Is it dying? Is it resurrecting? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now we have an explanation for these phenomena. Oh, it's gravity, blah, blah, blah. You know, the earth, gravity, da, 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 da. Okay, we can explain it technically, but that's not how our ancestors used to interpret it for sure. So what how did they interpret it? And these are the kinds of thoughts I was having when I was writing my book. Like I was trying to get myself into an ancient way of thinking. And actually, one thing I've been doing for a very long time, way before I wanted to write my book, I used to do some exercises where I used to just use my imagination and just imagine that I was like a primitive man, like a prehistoric man. Okay, I used to do that. Okay. This is a very long time ago, and I used to just imagine, you know, I didn't have any tools, I didn't have anything, and I was just trying to survive in the wild. And I used to imagine, you know, what do you have to do to survive? You know, what do you have to do? And then it just put my mind into a really simple way of interpreting reality, because we don't see the world how our ancestors used to at all. For sure, we don't. So how can we understand what they were talking about in ancient writings if we don't try to at least put ourselves in a frame of an ancient human, you know? But then the result of these exercises was to see, at least for me, that's what happened, to realize that their ancient way of thinking in a way is more profound than ours. You know, because we have a tendency of thinking, oh, in the past people were dumb, you know, they had superstitions and they didn't really understand reality. And they, you know, like what I was saying before, the sun comes out of the ground, then goes back into it. Usually people would interpret that like, oh, they didn't have the correct interpretation of the phenomenon, you know, we're really on a globe, and the earth is turning around the sun, and all the other stuff is just illusions, you know, just like a false perspective, basically. So why would we want to understand why the sun comes out of the ground and goes back into it when it's all just an illusion, right? You know what I mean? Like but that wasn't the end result of my thinking. In the end, I saw they interpret that phenomenon, and in interpreting phenomenon, you end up finding the deep patterns of the universe. It doesn't matter that much if it's the technical explanation fits or not. It doesn't matter that much, because it refined their thinking into something that was universal and applicable at all scales. So the technical explanation isn't really that important, because in looking at the sun going around, you can understand the pattern of a cycle. And once you understand that, then that is a true pattern that manifests in many places. So it doesn't matter if it's gravity doing it or if something else. You can still understand the pattern. So, like, let's say in the book of Ecclesiastes, he's talking about just the cycle pattern, right? In the book of Ecclesiastes, he's just talking about the problem of, you know, things rising and falling, and seeing all the implications of that. Like, you know, what's the purpose of life if everything you do gets destroyed? You know, that was his reflection, and he probably got those reflections by observing the sun and the you know, the cycles. So what does it matter if it's gravity that causes this, you know, this manifestation? It doesn't. You can still see the pattern. You can still understand the nature of this manifestation, the cycle. So in the Ecclesiastes, he comes up with all the conclusions of what is the implication of living in a cycle. What is the implication of that? You know, you're born, you die. It's like nothing happens really in the end, you know. And you can do that with anything, you know. You can see the cycle pattern in anything. So you see what I'm saying? It's like there's a technical level to reality that is not as important as people think. It's important when you do science and when you do engineering and stuff like that, but it's not really important as a human. That's who we are, understanding the technicality of how things work. Is that really important? I mean, like we were talking about before, gardening.
Right.
If you experience gardening, is it really important to know the biology and all the technical, molecular explanations of how the plant grows? No, it's not. It's really not. It changes nothing to the gardening, actually. If you can be really good at gardening and know absolutely nothing about molecules and atoms and stuff like that. You see what I'm saying? Like there's different levels.
You could still put a seed in the ground and it sprouts up, and you can still engage with it all that way.
You engage with it, and it's like there's different levels, and we have a tendency to think that the bottom level is more real than the upper levels. It's not more real.
Like the scientific, technical, know how it works level.
Yeah, or for example, like saying that the atom is made of molecules and atoms, somehow that's more real than the level of the plant itself that has its own laws and rules, and it develops and things. But it doesn't matter how the atoms work at that level. It's like, if you're familiar with computers, we can use the analogy of a computer. It's actually a really good analogy. You can be a computer programmer, and know zero about the hardware. You understand what I'm saying? Like you're a programmer, you know zero about how the computer works.
Yeah, no
can
DOS,
still be
no
a programmer.
ones and zeros. Yeah.
Yeah. And no like the mechanics of the computer, the wires and the you don't need to know that level, and you can still be a programmer. So isn't that interesting though? So it's not true that these levels have to be connected to each other in your knowledge. Here's another, the opposite, the flip side is also true. You can know exactly how a computer works, technically, physically, and not know how to program. These levels are not as connected as we might imagine. They're not, actually, they're separate because they're at different levels. The computer, the programmer doesn't need to know there's different kinds of computers anyway. I mean, you can make different kinds of computers. You can make computers with, vacuum.
You can make like a tablet.
Yeah, you can make a computer with gears. They used to do that in the old days. They made basically calculating machines just out of gears and stuff like that. Literally mechanical calculators. So, but your program doesn't depend on this level.
Yeah.
You can have different kinds of computers and still have the same program that runs on different computers. It's the same program. So it's similar, in life you have a technical level that's like mechanical, almost like a computer, like the physics of it. But the scientists and most people like that are trying to explain the upper levels always with the lower levels. But there's no guarantee that these two levels are connected in the way that they're trying to make it seem it is. Just like the program is not connected to the hardware of the computer, maybe reality is made in the same way. There's a level of technical atomic stuff or whatever, molecules, and is it really that connected to the next level, which is, let's say, for example, life, living creatures, how they interact with each other and how they function.
Like a social level.
Maybe not connected at all, Maybe this level of atoms and molecules could be totally different, could be made of other material, and it would still be the same rules functioning above it. Just like a computer program doesn't need always the same computer hardware. So this is kind of the stuff I start to understand at one point. This was helpful for me because it led me away from a certain way of thinking that we're used to, because it's, we see it around us because of the dominance of science.
Yeah, Matthieu, let me ask you this. So can we make the same mistake on the other side where we're focusing too much on the, like, as you were just describing, the lower level, technical, mechanical, atomic level? Can you focus too much on the higher level above life, let's say? And what would that be? How would you describe that?
Well, I think you could do that for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I don't want to take too many digs at theology and philosophy because, I mean, I have respect for people who do that. And I also have respect for scientists, by the way. I have respect for biologists and chemists and all that stuff. I don't want to, it's not about that. It's about, they don't have a monopoly. That's the thing. Okay. I mean, I have respect for those areas of knowledge, but I don't like it when they think they have a monopoly and that that their level encompasses the whole thing, because it doesn't. So, like, for example, that's what I was going to say. Like, let's say philosophy and theology. These are really abstract levels of, you're talking about being, like metaphysics, like Aristotelian metaphysics, or you're talking about being and, all these categories that are very abstract. And in theology, same thing. You're talking about God being omnipresent, and but these are really, really high level categories that are extremely abstract. I mean, is that really useful? I mean, is it really useful for human existence and human well-being to know that God is omnipotent and how do you say that in English? Omniscient? Is that how I say it in English?
Omniscient.
Omniscient. Is it really useful? And in my experience, sometimes, I have some interpretations of certain stories in the Bible, and some people come up to me and they're like, and they give another interpretation based on the idea that God is omnipotent. And usually what they say doesn't bring any insight to the story. It doesn't. Like, it doesn't. The fact that you tell me God is omnipotent as a principle, by the way, I'm not saying God isn't omnipotent. I'm just saying that is such a high level of abstraction.
Right.
It's like you're dealing with some some ideas that are extremely high level, like extremely abstract. And then you kind of separated them from reality, and even separated them from the stories in the Bible. So when you read the stories in the Bible, you see God acting in a certain way. You see God changing his mind. You see God doing things and then repenting. God repents in the Bible many, many times. So even when he does the flood, he repents. It said he repents from creating the human, and then it says he repents from doing the flood. Okay, so but then a theologian is going to come to me and say, God is omnipotent. God is omniscient. So he's not really changing his mind. He already knew that he was going to do it and then change it, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I'm not saying it's not true. But what I'm saying is your high level idea of God doesn't help me understand this story. It doesn't. In fact, it hinders me a little bit in understanding the story, because you've got this really high ideal. And when I read the story, it doesn't even fit with what you're saying. The story itself doesn't fit with these high level ideas. You can make it fit through all kinds of, manipulations and saying,
right.
You can say he already knew that he was going to change his mind, and then he would, so he didn't really change his mind. And okay, but that doesn't help me. It really doesn't. It looks more like you're trying to justify your ideal with the story, and you're dancing around it. It's like it's hard for you to justify that God is omniscient based on this story, because in the story, that's not what it looks like. Now, again, I'm not saying God isn't omniscient. I'm just saying these are high level ideas. And I don't think we have, between the stories in the Bible, okay, and these high level theoretical ideas, I don't think we have the right connectors here to make it make sense. I think it's true that God is omniscient and omnipotent and all that, but we're missing something. Like, we have two levels here, the levels that are described in the story of the Bible and these theological things. And I think there's a gap here between these two things. And I think we don't know how to join them correctly. It would be interesting if we did, but I honestly think we don't. So what happens is
that's like the work that we have for our generation for this time, is to try to find those ways of connecting.
I think it's the work of all generations. It's not just us. I mean, I think at some point, this is my theory, but I think at some point there was a Christianity took some Greek concepts, okay, some Greek philosophy concepts, and they integrated it into Christianity. And this actually happened before Christianity. It happened in Judaism. There was Judaism, and then they encountered the Greeks, and the Greeks had high level mathematics and they had high level philosophy, right? So, and then the Jews also tried to integrate these ideas into their worldview, and then it created some problems. They're aware of it. I mean, it created some problems because it's too high. It's too high. Again, that doesn't mean it's not true. Like, there's a difference between not true and too high. Too high means we can't connect our reality with these high level ideas. We don't know how to connect them properly so that it makes sense. So we have like separate universes, a universe of theological understanding and a universe of stories in the Bible. And then now we even have lower levels that are not connected to these either. Yeah, we have our scientific, technical knowledge. It's not connected to this, and that's not connected to that. So we have like disconnected realities that we don't know how to connect. And I think this is our main problem, and it's a big one. It's like we live in a fractured world. We live in a world that has fractured. There's no bridges between the different levels of things. And this is what we have to do. So when you say, is this what we have to do? Yes, I think it is. We have to work at connecting these things in a good way, not in a way where like we're fighting each other. Like, there shouldn't be fights between religion and science, and there shouldn't be fights between theology and, let's say, just the biblical narrative. There shouldn't be conflicts. There should be bridges created so that everything makes sense. But it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy. I'm not claiming that to have it, but I try to.
Your books you're like endeavoring to accomplish that, or try to help bridge those things.
Yeah, definitely what I'm trying to do. Yeah. I'm trying as best as I can to do what I see. I mean, I was more concerned with bridging the gaps between the stories in the Bible and our scientific worldview, our technical worldview. But I didn't want to necessarily bridge those gaps. What I really wanted to do is just make sure there's no confusion between the two. So you see, there's a lot of work we have to do. So I wasn't really even trying to bridge the gaps, really, because it's hard. It's something I'm going to let someone else do, eventually maybe. But I just wanted to make sure there's no confusion between these two levels. Like, there's no confusion between the hardware and the software, like we know that they're separate things. And I think it's possible to make some bridges between them. I think some people are doing it. I mean, I don't necessarily follow all of that, because to me, I don't see it as my job. I don't see it as my.
You leave it up to your brother.
My domain. Well, my brother, I mean, he's more of an interviewer. I mean, he's not the one doing the work. He's more of someone who interviews the people who are doing that work. You know what I'm saying? He's not the one who's doing the actual bridge, but he's serving, in a sense, as the bridge of communication, because he's not the scientist who's doing trying to, bridge the gap. In a way he is, but you know what I mean? He's not the one doing the technical bridging,
Right.
So, and to me, there's another bridge, like I was saying before, above theology, our tradition of theology and philosophy. To me, that comes from the Greeks. It doesn't even come from the Jewish tradition. You got pure Greek stuff, and it is valuable. And the Jews back then knew it was valuable, or else they wouldn't have tried to integrate it into their worldview. They knew this is something, mathematics comes from these high level ideas, and all of philosophy. It's valuable stuff. It's not wrong. It's just disconnected from reality. I mean, the idea that if you study philosophy, you're not really going to do anything with it. That tells us, whether that's true or not. I mean, it tells us a little bit the idea that this is some disconnected stuff, because it's just ideas. It's not connected to. It doesn't go down into the ground, Yeah. And I think we need to do
concrete reality, like put it in practice. Like, what is these things? What does symbolism and wisdom and principle look like in practice? Does it look like chopping wood and baking bread and weaving clothes together? Like,
you mean in the symbolism? In symbolism or in theology?
And what fascinates me about symbolism is that it's something that we can all participate in, yet it can hide in plain sight.
Yeah.
And so one thing that you had mentioned before is initiation, like in that comment with the conversation with Garrett, like how symbolism could be right in front of you. The biblical stories, the scriptures are right in front of you, and yet you just don't even see, you don't engage with the meaning. And then you do, and then you learn some more, you read your book, let's say, and all of a sudden everything's just opened up. It's almost like, would you say it's like a veil being pulled back, and then you can see what's behind? You're like, oh wow, it's amazing. You're like, wait, there's a little bit more, and then you pull another veil. Is it something
Yeah.
like that? And like, how does that work? And like, what is the dynamic of, initiation, having a veil, and then seeing what's behind that, or engaging in that realm, and then that of revelation, or even say like nakedness, like where there's this idea that there's a veil between what you can and can't see, or what you can and can't engage with, and then having to come to a certain place where you can now engage with it and now see it. Like, how does all that work?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from my experience of it. I mean, has a lot to do with the idea of perspectives. Okay, I use that word. I'm going to start using that a lot, by the way, when I'm going to write the word perspective. It's very important because it's about looking at the world through a certain perspective, and that's why certain things are not visible to you sometimes, and then they become visible because you're looking at them differently. It's your eyes that change, it's your perspective that change. So they were always there, but you couldn't see them because your eyes couldn't see them. You weren't paying attention to them, you didn't see their importance. That's how another way to say it, that because there's a difference between seeing something and seeing the importance of something, right? You see this is important, or you just see it as a detail, in the background. So that's how it happens. I mean, to me, the way it happens, it's like there's certain things that you can perceive that make you change your perspective. Most of the things that you see, they don't change your perspective. They don't do anything to you, to your mind, really. You just see them as objects, like I can look at my cup here, it's not changing my perspective. It's a cup, but there's certain things that when you see, they modify your vision of the world. And look, I can give you an example. When I was writing my book, I had something like that. I had many of those, but there's one that's easy to explain. At one point, I was trying to understand the symbolism of light, okay? Light and dark and things like that. And then I did the exercise that I was telling you about before. I put myself in a really basic, almost prehistoric man frame of mind. And then I realized that light is fire. There's only one kind of light, and it's fire. And that seems like a, not important insight, but it was extremely important. It changed my perspective, because then I realized, okay, we're used to light bulbs and stuff like that. We're used to all different kinds of lights, right? And but in the past, the only kind of light was fire. So light is fire, okay? And then I realized, okay, this is important, because when you read the Bible and you think about the concept of light, you got to realize it means fire. So that means, among other things, that the light consumes things, because fire consumes. It eats matter. It eats. It's an eater. So that's hugely important in terms of symbolism. So now you understand, okay, when there's a light, there needs to be something that's eaten, consumed, for the light to be there. Okay. So that's just an insight that I had about light when I was thinking practically instead of just abstractly, like a modern man, a light bulb. So we had this really abstract category of light. But if you go back down into the practicality of the prehistoric man, and let's say it like that, light is fire. Okay. So, and then all of a sudden, I use my light to cook food. I used to think there was no relationship between the concept of light and the concept of cooking, right? But now, if I think light is fire, I cook with the thing that makes the light. See, you make different associations in your mind. Okay, let me give you another example. This is an example. Now I'm going to reveal to you something important that happened recently. Another example of an insight that I had recently, and then this is the source of what I'm going to write in the book that I want to write. Okay, I was thinking about the whole concept of renewal and all that stuff. I've been talking about this recently, and this happened to me. I was thinking about the concept of a direct light and a reflected light. Okay. And then I realized something. I realized, when do we see reflected light in the prehistoric man's world? When do we see that? When do we see reflected light? There's not that many times. We're used to having mirrors around us, and glass and stuff like that. That's where we see reflected light. But when in nature, where do we see reflected light? You think you know the answer?
I'd have to say probably the moon.
Okay, there you go. Important, but closer to Earth, where do we see reflected light?
I don't know. What do you have in mind?
Water.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
You mean like a glimmering?
Water is the only substance that reflects light in nature.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Okay. So that, again, it kind of with the fire thing, that seemed like it's not really important. Yes, it is. Because now every time it talks about water in the Bible, it's connected to the concept of a mirror. Okay. So just like when I was saying before, I didn't used to associate cooking food with light. But if light is fire, then those two things are connected. Same thing here. I didn't used to associate mirrors with water. But now they're connected. So now when I say something like, you got to renew yourself, okay? And I say, what is the symbolism of renewal in the Bible? It's water, right? Cleaning yourself with water. Drinking water is about refreshing. Refreshment means renewal. You're renewing yourself. But then also with the water, I see myself in the water. The water is a mirror. Okay. So when I'm cleaning myself, I can even see this really practically. A person goes down to the lake and he cleans himself. He sees himself in the mirror when he cleans himself. See, those things are connected. Looking at yourself in a mirror and cleaning yourself in nature are things that are connected. But in our modern life, they're not connected. You see? So in the symbolism, they are connected. So when in the Bible, it talks about water, you got to have all those connections in your mind. And they are, when you read the stories, you see them, the connections of, you see yourself in the mirror. Okay. So just an example, but you see how what I'm saying is there's some, if you go back to the nature, right? The reality of simple human beings, your mind makes certain connections that you don't make as a modern human. And then, but if you want to understand ancient stuff, ancient scripture and things like that in symbolism, you do have to return to a primitive experience,
Well, and as soon as you say that, I start thinking of all of the other stories in the Bible that have to do with fluidity, you could say, like whether, of course, the grand scale of that would be Noah's flood, where it renews or washes clean the whole world and then starts afresh. But then I also think I've been spending a lot of time with the story of David and Bathsheba, where David kind of reached the bottom of his pit in his fall. And then what actually renews him in that moment is repentance and weeping. So just like the fluid of tears.
Yes. Now you're thinking the right. Yeah.
Would that be something like repentance and weeping and sorrow would be a way of like cleansing the soul or renewing the spirit? Would it be something like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you just did a really good insight. Crying is water. When does water come out of us? When we cry. It's not often that we have water coming out of us.
Yeah.
So the symbolism of water is associated with crying. So that's not usually what we would think. If I just ask someone in the street, do you think water is connected to not crying, but do you think these two things are connected, like being sorrowful and water? They'd be like, no, not really. Well, crying. Okay. There's a connection now. So now when you think of someone who's crying, you see the symbolism of water. But in the Bible, these things are the stories are constructed so that you see these connections. Okay, so we were talking about David in the story of Bathsheba. She's bathing when he sees her on the roof.
Right.
She's in the water. So, and then later, because of that, David has a moment of repentance where he sees himself as guilty. Okay, so it's reflected. It's all related. Okay, the Bible is written in a way
you're right, because the prophet comes and he uses a parable to reflect David's actions, because David doesn't even see what he's doing. That is wrong, or that he's fallen into unrighteousness or corruption.
So now
he's broken commandments. I mean, he's really bad, and it takes like a prophet, like holding up or like framing that, using a parable, kind of like in a, what would you say, like a mirror or a reflective way? Yeah,
he created a mirror for David, and then he saw himself. But you see, if you understand mirror and water go together, then you see, Bathsheba, she was in the bathtub. So it's like he was looking at her when she was cleaning herself in the bath. So the mirror's there already. So see, his sin started with the mirror. The bath is the mirror. It is a mirror. If you can, like I said before, make some certain connections in your mind that we don't usually do.
So in that stage, when he sees the very first part of that story, he's not going to war. He's not doing what he's supposed to. He's a bad king, unrighteous king. And then he sees Bathsheba in the bath, seeing the reflection. What is reflecting to him at that point, the first part of that story?
Well, that's what we're supposed to imagine. I don't know. It doesn't say, right? I mean, we don't know. The story doesn't say all these. These are things you're supposed to just have insights about. The idea is, what was he seeing in the bath? He was seeing himself. That's what he was seeing. But that's what, when you have a child, that's what you see in the woman. You see yourself in the future. It's like a glimpse of yourself in the future. If you see a woman that you love, that you fall in love with, and you imagine that she's going to become your wife, what are you doing? You're seeing your future. You're seeing yourself in the future. You're seeing your kids in her, but your kids it's you. Kids are you, right? They're a reflection of you in the future. It's just an example. I mean, you're supposed to think about these things. There's many things to understand in here, but the idea is there's certain connections that we don't naturally do anymore because we're too separated from nature. Really, we're too separated from nature, and we can't see. So you said before the moon, okay? The moon reflects, is a reflector. So that means the moon is connected to water, connected to mirrors, and connected to repentance, connected to all that. The moon calls forth the tides, right? We're saying before, crying, when we have a moment of reflection, of sorrowful reflection, we cry. Crying is related to repentance. Again, water, all these things are connected, but we don't usually necessarily see them as connected,
Right.
So,
but I mean, it's also tied to really like the female anatomy too, because so much of the female body is tied to cycles of fluidity, whether it's menstrual or there's a lot of other things, but
and connected to the moon. Menstruation connected to the moon. I don't know how scientists explain that, by the way, but it's a traditional thing, that the idea that menstruation is connected to the cycles of the moon. It's well known. I mean, it's still true. It's still true today. A little less true because the more we separate from nature, the more these certain things separate, like I
Right.
think in the past, women used to probably all be menstruated at the same time. That's what I think. It's my theory. Like women in a close
But they
quarters, they
do.
used to have all their
Totally do.
menstruations at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, if they're working in close proximities, it's just a matter of time
Yeah. And I
before
think it was
they're
related to the moon
syncing up and
too.
cycling.
But
Yes.
now we're live separate and we live on fake light, and all the cycles are messed up now. So these are subtle things, they're subtle influences. So if you have a big light bulb in your house, you're not influenced by the moon as much as we used to. But if you don't have any light, artificial light, then the moon is a stronger influence on you.
Right.
But the influence of the moon isn't just the light, by the way. I mean, people who say that they don't know what they're talking about. There's an influence of the moon that's more than just the light. I don't know how it works, but now there's no doubt in my mind, now that I live more in nature, the moon has definitely cycles of influence, and you can feel it. I mean, there's undeniable, and you can hear it you can see it in the animals. Often when the animals go crazy, it's moon cycles. I mean, I could predict now today that the animals are going to go nuts, during the night because of the moon.
Well, it's like the technical term, we kind of use it differently today, is like hysteria, right? Right, where it's like that's tied to going crazy at moon time or at certain cycles that are moon influenced.
Yeah. These are all real things. I don't care what scientists or materialists say when they say it's not true. They don't know what they're talking about. I don't trust them as much as I used to, that's for sure.
What are the stages of the life of a woman, and how do we understand that, symbolically?
Another example of an insight that I got, because I was thinking practically, okay, going back to practical stuff, and I realized something really important about the symbolism of women and the role of women in ancient society, but it's changed today. But the woman in the ancient world, okay, because it was, let's say, patriarchal, okay, because it was, right? I mean, the woman, her function in the universe was very different from that of a man, because not just in terms of the sexual dynamics and the reproduction. I'm talking about something else here. Let's say you're a father, okay, and you have a daughter, and you're trying to imagine in the ancient world, okay. Now your daughter, when she's in your family, she's useful to you, just like any other member of the family can be useful. She does chores and things like that. Like your son, they do some chores, and there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, I mean, you're a family, you're working together, you're doing things together, you're trying to survive together, right? So it's not like anything wrong with that. But your daughter, in your mind, you say, one day I'm going to lose her. She's going to be gone out of my family. I mean, how intense is that? Now, we don't see it as much today because it's not the same structure of dynamics of families and stuff. But in the past, my daughter, if she's going to leave my family and she's going to go and join another family. Okay, think about the implications of that. It's a big deal. So I have this person that's in my family now that in the future is like almost like a traitor in a way. She's going to be not in my family anymore. She's going to be in another family. Now imagine you have different families that are in competition, okay? Imagine you have families in competition, which is probably what it was in the past and still is today to a certain extent. And you have a daughter and now she's loyal to you, your family, you. But in the future, if she gets married, she's going to become loyal to another family. Okay. Now, what if that family is not necessarily that friendly? You're always in a little bit of a competition between groups. I mean, it's just a fact of life. Now, my daughter now will be able to say things about this family to that family, which maybe I don't want. Okay, I'm just giving some examples here for you to understand all the implications of this daughter going to join another family. It's a big deal because now, and also the opposite is also true. Okay, when you have a son and he gets married to a daughter, you're welcoming someone from a foreign family. Another family, so a member of another family is coming into your family. Okay. So now, same thing, but in reverse. But you gotta see all the implications. So is she loyal now to her new family? Or is she still seeing herself as part of the old family? Now, if all the families are getting along, there's not a big deal, not a big difference. But if the families aren't close, if they're in somewhat of a competition with each other, it is a big deal. Now you've got a spy, potential spy in your family. Okay. So these are all things that we don't think about anymore because we don't function like that. So, but this is very important. Like, here's an example in the story of Jacob. Okay. Once you understand these dynamics that we don't think about anymore, in the story of Jacob, he goes off into his wife's family. He joins the family of Laban. That's not what's supposed to happen. It's upside down. Usually it's the other way around. Usually it's the woman that goes and joins the family of the man. But in that case, it's like an inverted thing. And it causes some weird problems of dynamic problems in there because Laban is like, he's trying to flee. Laban is trying to keep him in his family. He's trying to keep Jacob in his family. His family, you know? He wants to keep his daughters. Anyway, I don't want to get too far into this, but it's just an example of the role of the woman in the past was very, very different from that of the man, okay? She was the stranger that comes into a family. That's what she was, okay? It's very different. So if you're a father and you have a daughter, you know that your daughter soon is going to leave you into another family. She's going to become like a resource or a member of another family. It's a big deal. It's like we don't think about that. And if you're a father of a son, you're going to have a new member in your family. So you've got to trust these new members. You know, it's going to change the whole dynamic of your family. So this is something that we don't think about. And if you think about that and you read the stories in the Bible, you'll see how important it is to keep that in mind. The woman, you know, like when I talk about the Eve, the role of Eve in the story of Adam and Eve, and I say Eve, she is the foreign perspective, right? She mediates the foreign perspective. I don't know if you saw the conversation I had with Jordan Peterson. Did you see that?
I did. Yes.
Okay. So Eve mediates the foreign perspective. Now, think about what I just said. The daughter literally is that marries your son is a foreign perspective. Another family, a foreign family, she comes into your family. So she really is the foreign perspective in your family now. You see? So it's not just metaphors, you know, it's a very concrete. So the female is a foreign perspective in your family. So she can so that's a lot of implication. She can bring something new to your family because she comes from another family. She's got new things that you've, you know, maybe never experienced or whatever. She's got different, even if it's in the same culture, I mean, there's still some differences in different families, you know, it's still something new that she brings. And but then all the problems are also there. She could be like a treacherous woman. Who knows? You know, if that family is your enemy, I mean, they could send their daughters to, you know, stab you in the back while you're sleeping. You know, I'm doing the extreme examples, but it's just.
But on the other side, so the family that is receiving the daughter, is that like that the betrothal is like kind of like the integration of a foreign perspective, or how to integrate the foreigner?
Yes, yeah. They have to integrate some things that are different from their family inside of their family. They've got to deal with these differences. So, you know, sometimes, you know, feminists get upset at the idea that they used to pay a dowry, right? When you give your daughter away, they used to have to pay. But it's not really insulting when you think about it. It says that she was worth something to that family. She's worth something to her family, and now I'm going to lose her. I should be compensated for that. I mean, it's not like a negative thing. It means she had a lot of value to that family. It's like, now I'm losing my members of the family is a valuable thing. It's not an object. It doesn't make it a commodity. It's just, it was acknowledged that she had value and that she had to be paid, you know? It's not an insult. It's the other way. It's often like that. Certain kinds of feminists, they see things as insulting when it's really the opposite, actually. And you know, the thing where Adam names the animals, and then Eve, it says Adam didn't find a help, you know. Some feminists see that as insulting, like, oh, Eve is like one of the animals. No, she is not like one of the animals. That's the whole point. So why do you see it as an insulting? It's like sometimes they invert certain things, you know. It doesn't say she's one of the animals. It says she's not one of the animals. So, you know, take it for what it is instead of inverting it, because that's what they often do. Same thing here with the dowry thing. It's not an insult. It's the opposite. It's like your worth. You got worth. Your family's losing you. That's should be compensated. You know what I'm saying? So these are just, it's probably not what you wanted, you know, in terms of the whole women thing, but I'm giving you things that you've probably never thought of. Now, I don't want to tell you things that you already know, you know, because we all understand that a young girl represents, you know, innocence and things like that. We all understand that in a way. She represents nature and things like that. But I think I'm maybe giving you something maybe that you haven't thought about. The idea, the dynamics of a family for a woman and a man were completely different. They were like opposites.
Yes.
You know, and
yes.
You want a son, like if you're a father, you have a son, your son's going to stay in your family forever. But if you have a daughter, she's going to go. Big difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like a huge difference.
Huh. So it's almost like you're describing from the perspective of a father and having a daughter. I'm wondering, like, are all of these things like tied together? You talked about having a foreign perspective, having a mirror that reflects, and then like this aspect of a father to a daughter. Like all of these things, like, do women represent this or carry this out in the way that they live their lives on the earth in reality?
I think so. I think they, yeah.
Compared
to men, yeah.
So is the all of these things, are they part of that refreshing renewal? Is this like recreation in a way? Is that like what motherhood really is too?
Yeah, motherhood is exactly that. Motherhood is, yeah, it's creating a new human. That's what mothers do. They give birth to a new man. They give birth to the new man. So it is about refreshment. A baby is a fresh, a new human. See, quite literally.
I think about that like in the story of Bathsheba too, because there was two children. One was the I guess the seed of unrighteousness that did not grow. You know, after David repents, from conceiving with Bathsheba and murdering her husband for intents and purposes. In order to make that happen, it was like after that point of repentance, which actually is kind of interesting, you know, to kind of draw upon your book, is that he repents for 7 days. He prays for 7 days. And then at the end of that 7th day, that child dies. And it's an unnamed child. It does not have a name.
Yeah.
And then, so what happens, the very next thing that happens, they don't use the number 8, but the very next thing that happens narratively is the conception of Solomon.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's almost like
so he's like
all of those other things were washed away, and then on the 8th day, right, is, or like, how would you say, like the recycling into, or the turning of the cycle to day 1 of a new week or a new era, is Solomon, right? And then so that's like this seed, like she brings that Bathsheba, the same person, same mom, is now delivering forth, I guess, the next era of the kingdom. That's a seed sown in righteousness rather than out of corruption.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So it's like like many stories in the Bible, it's like a microcosm in that event of the whole pattern of David, what he is. So that event is like a mini version of all of the story of David. You understand what I'm saying? Because David represents that as a whole.
How so?
He represents the renewal, He's also the 8th child, by the way. David is the 8th.
Oh, right. Yes. Okay, so why is it significant that it's 7 and then 8? What's happening there?
I think it's what you just said before. It's the new start, right? It's like the new week, the new cycle. It's like the one begins again, right? The 8 is like the 1. So what you said was correct, in my opinion. You had it.
Okay. Well, I suppose this is my attempt to try to put your principles into action, so to speak, with because it's interesting. You do discuss David in your book, but it's typically in the margins. I noticed. Was that intentional?
Well, it's because, man, my whole purpose in life is to explain what David is all about. If you want to know a little secret.
Tell me more. Why is that?
Yeah, it's like my whole reason for doing anything basically is because I want to explain the David. I want people to know what King David is all about, because I think it's related to our times. Like, this is the time it's the time for King David. I don't know how else to say it. Like, this is what's I think is going to happen. So we have to be able to recognize the signs, because if you understand what something is, you can recognize the signs of it. So this is, I'm not there yet in my publications or whatever. I mean, hopefully I will get there at one point, but now I'm getting closer to it. We're talking about Eve and stuff. I'm getting closer to David. I've always wanted to write a book about Samson, because Samson is related to David. Okay. And the reason is because eventually I want to talk about David. So most of what I do, most of what I write, and most of what I talk about it's about one day being able to talk about David so that people will understand it. I mean, I could talk about it now, but I don't think anyone would really understand it, because David is a really special character. It's not easy to understand. So it's like there's certain things you have to know in order to understand what David is about. There's like,
are you just waiting for the right veils to be pulled back at the right time?
Yeah, you have to explain certain things before you can understand. Like, you got to talk about Eve before you could talk about David. So that's what I'm going to do next. You got to talk about Samson too. So maybe I will write a book about Samson, just because, for the purposes of explaining David. I mean, I could say something right now about, I think you will understand, or I think your audience will understand, because there's certain key things that, it's like things that contain a lot of information. Okay. But we could still hear them. Okay. So here's something, like what David is all about. So I'll say it like this: David understood in life what Samson understood in death. Okay. So that's like a sentence that I'm giving to you. Like, you can understand a lot with that. Okay. So that's the difference between Samson and David. There's a note in my book about that. If you remember, I say that Samson is like the sun and David is the moon. Okay. That's not me. It's not me that makes that up. This has come from tradition. Okay. And Samson means sun. So that's, again, not a big mystery here. Samson literally means sun. Okay. So it's not, I'm not the one, I'm not making stuff up here. You know what I mean?
It's in the sun in the sky.
Say that again.
As in the sun in the sky?
Yeah. Not sun, S-O-N, sun, S-U-N, yeah. And David represents the moon, is connected to the symbolism of the moon. And the difference between the two is very important. Like if you want to understand David, read Samson and then read David, and you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Because David, what Samson does at the end of his life, what he understands, the mystery that he understands when he dies, is what Samson understands his whole life. Okay, so that's why they say what Samson understood in death, David understood in life. It's like a way to differentiate the two. And
Would that be
there's
like the
another.
setting of the sun and then the rising of the moon?
It's about the cycle. Okay, like the mystery of the cycle. What's the operation of that? Samson figures it out when he dies. Okay, David figures it out his whole life. He's got it during his life. He knows about the cycle his whole life, while Samson only figures it out at the end of his life. But he's got a good understanding of it. But he doesn't fully get it until he dies at the end. Okay, that's when he fully understands what this pattern is all about. On the other hand, David, he's got it in life. In life, he knows how to do certain things in a way where he'll benefit from the cycle of the pattern of the cycle. Okay, while Samson, he
From an
doesn't
early
really
age.
benefit from it. Sorry?
From an early age, David knows.
Yes, his whole life he knows, he understands the mystery of the cycle. Samson, he doesn't benefit from it. He doesn't understand it enough to benefit really from it. Okay, it kills him. In fact, it's what kills him. There's another hint in tradition in the Bible. You know the verse that says a living dog is better than a dead lion, right? You remember that proverb? It's related to David and Samson. The living dog is David, and the dead lion is Samson. Okay, this is from tradition. I'm not the one who's making this up. So Samson is the dead lion, and David is the living dog. Okay, so David is connected to the animal dog. Samson is connected to lion. Well, that one's easy because it's a little more clear in the story. By the way, when Samson kills the lion, what do you think that means? It means he's killing himself. Okay, that's what it means. It's like a hint. It's like a glimpse of the end of the story, because there's lots of hints about that in the story. Well, the lion is a solar symbol. You know, it's associated with the sun in every culture that has a lion in it. So the idea is when he kills the lion, he's killing himself. It's a representation of the cycle, and it's a representation of the whole story of Samson. There's lots of hints too. I mean, when he asks the riddle to the Philistines, you know, they're trying to figure out the riddle, and so they say, "What is stronger than a lion?" That's in the riddle. From the strong comes the sweet, you know. So they pretend like they're figuring out the riddle, but really they were told by his wife, which is really his enemy. So, and then they say, "What is stronger than a lion?" Instead, they don't just give the answer. They don't say the strong is the lion. They ask it in the form of a question, which is very, very interesting. They say it's like a rhetorical question, you know, what is stronger than a lion? The answer is Samson. Okay, but Samson is the lion. Okay, I'm giving you some little hints here, but there's lots of hints in the story of what I'm saying. The little lion honey thing, the riddle, it's a symbol of the whole story of Samson. It's like a microcosm. That little riddle is the riddle of Samson himself.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just giving you some hints here. I don't know what you'll make of it, but and then David.
Yeah, David, go ahead.
I was going to say David is the same thing. So basically what he understands is the pattern of the cycle. Like you don't want to kill your enemy because you're killing yourself. And if you want to kill your enemy, you can kill yourself. That's the cycle pattern that he's understanding. David gets it, but he gets it in life. Like he manages to live even with that knowledge. So what he does is, while Samson gets that if he kills his enemy, if he kills himself, it ends up killing his enemy. That's how he understands the cycle in death. Okay. David understands it in life. So it's all about, like, he doesn't want to kill his enemy. He doesn't kill his enemy. Why? He knows if you kill your enemy, you're going to end up killing yourself. He knows. This is important. This is actually the pattern of the book of Judges. It's all about that. It's all about that. The judge, this is important stuff. Not a lot of people understand this. In the book of Judges, it's about, they are both judges and saviors at the same time. Okay. So it's the paradox of this cycle, because why? They're the saviors of Israel and they're the judges of Israel. Those are like opposites. They judge Israel and they save Israel. They do both. It's a cycle pattern. The whole book of Judges is about that. The paradox of being both the savior and the judge at the same time. So it happens in the book of Judges. The judges save the Israelites from their enemies, but then they end up becoming the enemies of Israel. If you read, you can reread it with that in mind. You'll see that I'm right. So they save them, but then they judge them. Judge them means attack them in that context, because that's what happens. So like Gideon ends up attacking Israel. He defends Israel, but then he ends up attacking Israel. And it happens with Samson too. He defends them, but he ends up attacking them. You'll see. Read the story. You'll find it very interesting with the little
very
things I'm saying.
Okay, so I'm just thinking about David. So he goes from knowing what's ahead of him, being called out as king as a very young boy, and then it's almost like this really, really long process for him to step into what that is. So like, why is that? What's happening there?
Because he doesn't want to kill Saul. That's why. That's why it's a long process. Because it's all about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He knows you got to wait. He knows you have to wait. You can't. If he kills his enemy, he'll be killed. It's like he kills himself. I don't know how else to say it. It's really simple. But in the end, trying to find a way to explain it, but because David is about renewing the king. He's the renewer of the king. That's why he's a musician too. And we see it in the story. Saul is taken over by the bad spirit at one point. And this is about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. There's lots of things in the Bible that are about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but for some mysterious reason, nobody understands that whole symbolism. I don't know why, but Saul gets taken over by the bad side. Okay, it's from God too. It says God sends an evil spirit to Saul, and then David receives the good spirit. Right? It's like, so it's the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, and David is there to renew kingship. Okay, so what does he do? He plays music for Saul. That's how he renews Saul. He's playing music. That's what it's for. Right? It's about renewal. It's about rest and renewal, and it works. It renews Saul, but it's temporary. So this is just so we understand what the role of David is. In my opinion, that's the whole point of that. It's like a microcosm. Again, there's so many in the Bible. There's always many versions of the whole story, right? So there's an example of that. That when David plays music to renew Saul, it's a mini version of the whole pattern of the story, which is about David's going to replace Saul, who's going to renew the kingship. Okay, so the whole time he's basically could be killing his enemy, which is Saul. He could kill him many times. Okay, but he refuses to do it because he knows if you kill, he's the king. So if he kills the king, He's killing himself. And this actually is not just a clever little thing. It's very practical. If you want to be a king, you don't want to kill the king, because killing the king is like a disrespectful thing. You're disrespecting the office of the king when you kill the king. You understand what I'm saying? So if he is king and he kills the king, he just disrespected the office of the king. So the next guy will just kill him too. So he's going to be the next in line to be killed by the next potential king. You understand what I'm saying? So
Yep.
it's like, if you do that, you put yourself in a cyclical, like a vengeance thing, like a retribution thing. So, I mean, you killed the king, so why wouldn't I kill you now if I want to be king? There's no reason not to. But
Right.
if he respects the office of the king and he refuses to kill him, even though he's his enemy, it's like he's saving his own life when he's doing that for the future, because he establishes the respect for the kingship. I'm not going to kill the king because he knows he's the king. See, he knows that in the future he's going to be king. So why I'm not going to kill what I'm going to be in the future, or else if I do that, somebody else will later do the same to me, and I'm going to be the one who's going to be killed. So this is just an example. The whole story is about the mystery of the cycle, and David is like a master of the cycle. That's the best way to understand what David. He's like, he understands deeply the cycle, and so he does things like he joins with his enemies, and then he uses his enemies against Israel. He uses the enemies of Israel against Israel. This is all about the cyclical pattern. He understands. He's like he's surfing. He's surfing the pattern of the cycle. He's like he's got deep knowledge. Deep knowledge of something about the concept of vengeance, and how do you avoid vengeance? How do you avoid the cycle of vengeance? How do you use your enemy against yourself, but you make sure that you don't get killed in the process, things like that. And this is what he does. And at one point he's with the enemy, and he's supposed to go fight Saul, and then I don't remember exactly what happens, but he ends up not going there. It's like he knows he's got this. Anyway, you should read the story with just what I told you already should help you. So think of David as like a master of the cycle. That's what musicians are, in my opinion, too. That's what they are in a way of speaking. So this is what it's hard to explain. Like, I would like to one day write a commentary on that whole book, but it's not easy. It's hard to explain. I've explained it a little bit. I think
it sounds like you're working your way up to it, though, man.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
it's hard.
I just, yeah. Well, so it's in a way, so you're saying like he doesn't want to introduce the pattern of revolution and then step into king, and then what do you know? Like, the whole kingdom is built on the foundation of revolution, and then it's like Rome or Russia, like any of these like empires that you study in history. It's like as soon as they introduce that, then it's like kings, they last for a year, and then another revolt happens, and then they're wiped out, and then the military coup happens, and then then a revolt against that, and it's like just this never ceasing pattern.
Yes, he understands deeply the consequences of entering into this pattern. Exactly. And so he still enters into it, though. This is interesting. He doesn't just say no to the cycle. That's not quite what he does. He just is able to use it to his advantage. Okay. And it's not the only story in the Bible that's like that. There's also the book of Esther is also about that. The book of Esther is about surfing the wave of the cycle. Okay, because it's about using the cyclical pattern to defeat your enemies, but not be defeated. Because when you use that, you can defeat your enemies with using the cycle. It's not that hard, but then it's going to come back to bite you. Okay, but in the book, David is a master of not having that happen to him. By the way, at the end, David, what does he do? He never gets vengeance, and at the end, when he has got his son, he gives him the responsibility, like, avenge my enemies. Okay, but it's not him now. So this is how he escapes it, and he does that at the end of his life too. So he's gonna die anyway, But he gives the responsibility of vengeance to his son. So this is actually important, right? Because it's like it's not me that gets vengeance; it's somebody else that. I mean, that's the whole it's the whole idea of a legal system. That's how you establish a civilization. You're not the one who's going to do your own law. Somebody else will. But in a primitive world, you avenge, right? You avenge yourself. And that's what they're trying to escape from, this whole warring cycle, the cycle of vengeance, never ending. So how do you get out of that? It's not easy. It's not easy to get out of that cycle. So that's what David knows how to do. And he knows how to escape the pattern and use it at the same, not just escape it and use it. So like I said, same thing, Esther is about using the cycle against your enemies. So this is what that book is all about. It's like there's a confusion at one point between Mordecai and what's his name? Haman, I think his name is Haman, the bad guy in the story. And then it happens when the king is trying to give a compliment to Mordecai, and Haman, for some reason, I guess because he's prideful or something, he hears it and he thinks the king is talking about him. Okay. So it's like he's complimenting Mordecai, but this guy Haman interprets it like the king is talking about him. So he says, what reward should I give to this man? And he thinks it's him. So he gets the best reward, But you see, this is where the cycle starts. Okay. It's like when there's a confusion between enemies. So there's two enemies, but there's a confusion. They're joined in some way. That's when the cycle starts. Okay. So in the book of Esther, that's where it starts. It happens when Haman misinterprets what the king says as if it was about himself. Something about pride too. It's like he wants to reward himself. Okay. And that's his downfall, because once you want to reward yourself, you're entering the cycle. You're entering that pattern. And then what happens is everything turns against him. He wants to punish Mordecai, but he ends up punishing himself. And he wants to reward himself, but he ends up rewarding Mordecai. You see? So Mordecai knows how to use the cycle to his advantage, while Haman is the opposite. He falls into every trap. He wants to reward himself, the opposite happens. He wants to punish his enemy, he gets punished. So this is just a little sideline. I just wanted to give you another example of that whole surfing the cycle thing, because they're not there. You can still use it. You use the cycle. You don't have to just act like it doesn't exist. But you got to be like really clever, like King David. This is what, in my opinion, this is what's coming soon, because the people who are messing our world up right now, they're also, I'd say, masters of the cycle. They know how to use that whole magic, that whole confusion of the vindication and things like that. They know what they're doing. So the person who can win against that is also someone who knows these things, how to use the cycle, but in a good way. So for renewal, real renewal, not the kind of renewal they want to do now.
I'm just thinking about like how Haman.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to pronounce it either.
Yeah, so he built the gallows, right? He builds the gallows with the intention of hanging his enemy, Mordecai, but he ends up building it and gets hung there himself.
Yeah.
Or like how David talks about the pit a lot, vindicate me, O Lord, and bring me out of the pit. Psalm after psalm talks about that. And then there's also one that says that this pattern of the enemies digging a pit that they end up falling into themselves.
Yes.
So
yeah,
do you think
David is all about that
today? Is that could be what's happening?
I'm not sure what's going to happen, but surely, I mean, I'm not saying that like trying to avoid the question. It's just we're in very strange times, that's for sure. We are not in normal times right now. It's lots of things are happening, and it's not gonna end well, and we need help. We need help from from above, I guess. Yeah, not gonna be easy, I think.
Matthieu, I gotta say that your book, your discussions, they're super helpful in creating like a map for navigating reality and acting in this world, for how to see things clearly, I know there's so many, I could go on and on just with how you've helped me, and just even the practicality of my family life, with my wife, and as a father, as a man who acts in society. So I appreciate that. And then it seems that we've come to the end of a cycle. It looks like the sun is setting or the moon's rising in the background there in your video.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a snowstorm too. I didn't notice that. Pretty much a snowstorm right now.
Well, you better get back to your yurt,
yeah, I
and
will.
strike up the wood burning stove.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to go do right now. Actually, I didn't notice there's a lot of snow right now. All right, that's my cue, I guess.
Yeah. Well, Matthieu, I appreciate your resilience in making this conversation happen. I know we had quite a number of things pop up right before that almost pushed it out and didn't make it happen. So I appreciate that a lot. And,
yeah, no problem.
And you know what? Like I look at this list of potential topics to discuss, and it's we would be barely halfway through. So I'm really excited that everything came up the way it did, and I look forward to more. I look forward to what you're doing and what you're writing, and this discussions that you're having.
Yeah, well, thanks. We can have another talk eventually, I guess, if you're interested. I mean, if you want to get me talking, all you got to do is mention the Bible, and then it's flows out of me. I don't really control it, so.
Well, there's a couple things. So the answer to that would be like yes, and then the other twofold part of that would be, okay, so the Symbolic World Group, we're working on a project right now. It's still veiled. And so I reserved some of those questions specifically for that, where it's going to be a very special project. And so I'd like to continue asking you a few questions I'll just say it's not going to be a video project.
Okay.
It's going to be something with actual paper. And so it'd be great to maybe engage in that way and answer a few of those questions in that format. And then, another thing is, were you able to read Cormac Jones, his article in the Symbolic World blog about the cosmic chiasmus?
I saw it. It seemed very interesting. Yeah, I will read it. I saw it like when you sent me an email, right? I went to see it. I saw what he was talking about, like patterns of, and I decided I was going to read it, but I didn't have time to. It's like I'm really busy right now. It's always I'm just getting ready for winter. Basically, it's like all my time is taken up by that. I'm like building shelters and stuff like that, because you got to have a work area, for the winter. I didn't have that last year. Now I learned my lesson. Like, you got to have an area that's sheltered from the elements, just like for building things and stuff like that. You can't work in the snow. I used to think you could, but I tried, and then it's like, no, everything gets wet and you can't do it. So
you're in the elements, man, in every way. So yeah, here's my thought on that is, when you get to that time, go ahead and read it, because reading that article was at the same level of reading Language of Creation, your book. And I'd be really curious to see if Cormac would be willing to have a conversation, and perhaps I could play as, moderator or host or something. So if you're up to it, it'd be really cool to get Cormac and you in the same talking space and see what comes of it. All right, Matthieu. Well, I'll let you go, man. It looks like it's getting cold up there.
Yeah, it's snowy. All right. Okay. Well, it was interesting.
Thanks again. Oh, and folks, if you haven't already, go get a copy of Language of Creation. Read it once, read it 5 times, read it 10 times. You won't regret it. And Matthieu, thank you very much for the talk.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Look forward to talking with you again.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.